Hey, Darlene here at Petal Academy. Happy Sunday. I hope you are somewhere nice and cozy. We are up at the cottage again. A bit rainy up here, but otherwise pretty warm, which is kind of nice. So it's getting us in that spring mood. So again, this is our easy Sunday bloom. So we're just going to give you a really fun and easy centerpiece idea or spring arrangement idea that you can hopefully try or use or get inspired by. So welcome everyone. If you have any questions, Rob's behind the camera, so go ahead and chime in with any questions that you may have, and hopefully he'll welcome you upon joining. But I'm just going to work with some really fun bulbs this morning. So we had a workshop earlier this week and we were using Muscari and Hyacinth. So our March box was themed Hyacinth, and part of the kit was some Muscari, but I had some leftovers. So Muscari are one of my favorite. They're just a mini version of a Hyacinth, and they're sort of really cute. They have these little tiny, almost like bluebells that sort of form on the stems, which are really pretty. And they're also very, very fragrant. So always really nice in the spring. I love to sort of have something scented in the house. It just kind of brings in those beautiful spring vibes. So I just love hyacinths. So they're one of my favorites. But a couple things that I'm going to use today is just a couple of boxes. So I have these wooden rustic boxes that we use sometimes for centerpieces or whatnot. And I thought for a nice spring centerpiece or kitchen island, or even just, outside as planters, because as it warms up, you can actually pop bulbs outside and they'll last a lot longer than, of course, inside because of the temperatures sort of dipping down. But you just kind of want to make sure that if you have anything perishable in here, like ivy or anything like that, that you bring them in the evenings if it's not above zero. So just keep an eye on that. But these are really great because you could use them, as little window boxes. You could use them on a table at your front entrance or whatever. Or, I don't know. They're just really fun. And they're loosely lined with plastic. So I'm not going to do anything fancy with these. If you were doing them as a more permanent planter, you'd probably want to put some gravel or something like that on the inside of them just to keep them a little bit, give them some drainage. But otherwise, you can just kind of use them as is. Always when I'm using something that is lined with plastic, I usually recommend that you put it on some kind of a tray or something inside, because oftentimes you can't guarantee that it's waterproof. So you want to protect your furniture as much as possible. So I always recommend popping that on a tray or anything like that. But this is going to be like super simple. Anyone can do this. I always find too, it's really nice to, when you're working with bulb plants or anything like of the sort, it's nice to repot them, right? So put them in something interesting in your home instead of just, the 6-inch or 4-inch pot like these are with. Oftentimes they come with this little wrapper, right? I mean, yeah, that looks great, but it's not really elevated and it doesn't really speak to your decor very well. So if you have the opportunity, and you can use pretty much any container that you may have around the house, like even a big salad bowl could be fun lined with bulbs, right? You might have to forego the salads for a while you use it, but think outside the box whenever you're thinking about doing something like this, because just having them in the plastic pot is not very inspiring. So I always say look for a fun container and go nuts. So really when you're going to do this is you're just going to squeeze off the bottom of the pot. Now you're going to notice with your bulbs, they always have these lovely roots that look really like, wow, what a beautiful looking root structure here. And it is. But one thing that's lovely with bulbs is you really can't harm them once they start to grow, right? Unless you overwater them is really the big thing here. So whenever you're digging into this, you're going to knock off some of the excess soil because we want to really show off that bulb. And I'm knocking that into the bottom of my planter just a little bit. But you can go ahead, you can squeeze this and tickle this. That's what we call it. And I want to get those bulbs showing so that I'm exposing the bulb part, because I actually think that part is really, really beautiful. And all I'm going to do is take these. Now I got a little broken one there. I'll save him for a bud vase. I'm just going to put them into my planter just like so. And I just want those bulbs just to kind of show just a little bit above my boxes. Just really simple. So again, you can pull this little tag out. That's always, it comes with like the little grower tag that shows you kind of where to plant these. That's another thing I want to mention about doing spring arrangements, it's great to use bulbs because you can reuse them in the garden afterwards. So after you're finished enjoying these, it's kind of the gift that keeps on giving. They'll be able to be potted into your garden, and then you can love them next year too. So you can save the bulbs in the fall. Save them and plant them in the fall in the garden. So you can see I've just got like the bulbs kind of hanging out there at the top. So this is like super easy. I'm just going to use about 3 pots. I've got 3 4-inch pots here that I'm using. And again, they come with these little plastic sleeves. So I'm going to discard those because those are not very exciting in my opinion. I put some gloves on too this morning just because I just finished doing the dishes up here. So I was like, hey, keep my hands clean while I can. But you know, you could get, if you really want to get nice and into the spring, dig into it, literally. No pun intended. If you want to dig into this, you can, you can use your bare hands too. That's all good. I've got my gardening gloves on. And you just want to kind of plant those in there. Just again, with those bulbs kind of emerging out the top. Now you can take some of your excess soil. You want to tuck them in a little bit. Make sure they're nice and planted. Make sure there's no air pockets around these bulbs so that when you water them, they are going to absorb the water in all the right spots. Just when I dug that in there.
Hey, welcome, Bev.
Hey, Bev. Happy Sunday. So yeah, so we're just popping these all in here, and you can kind of see, I love the way you can see the bulb. It's really perfect. Now I've done a little bit of ruffians here with my planting. So I bent a couple of the leaves and whatnot. So always as well, big challenge. So that's one of my little pots here. Big challenge with bulbs is they will start to get a little bit straggly and sort of bend over and all those kinds of things. As they grow, they're going to kind of emerge out of the pot and do some wild stuff. So what I like to suggest is adding some branches. So we're going to do that in just a moment. But I'm going to get these 2 planted up before we start that. So the branches will help add a bit of support to the pots as they grow. So again, I'm just pulling those off. You can keep these little 4-inch pots. I love, if any of you are gardeners out there, these are great for starting seeds. So what I like to do is grab them. You can put some soil in here. You may have had some that are started. You can transplant them into the larger pots at this point in time. I know some gardeners out there probably start planting seeds in like February, right? So these are great for transplanting those. They're also just great just to poke, 4 or 5 little holes in here, and you can start some seeds in them as well. So think a little bit about that before you pop them into the recycling bin. But so again, I'm just taking a lined plastic wooden box, but again, you could take any vessel that you might have around the house. And I'm just knocking some of that excess soil into the bottom to give me a little bit of a nice little level in here to plant my bulbs in. So altogether, I'm using about 6 4-inch pots of bulbs, which is not a huge investment for a lot of folks. You could just do one little container like this if you're, in a situation where you don't have a large space. Just one of these would be great too. But I love thinking about doing several little planters like this for a number of reasons. Like I was saying earlier, you can use this outside your front door. Use it as window boxes, use it as your front entrance, but you can also use it down a long table. So if you're always struggling, if you've got a large family and when you're entertaining, you're like, oh, how am I going to get something substantial on my table enough to decorate the whole table? Well, a few little boxes like this down a really long table looks fantastic and really fun. And you can add little eggs and things like that or votive candles in between them. And then you really get lots of good length to add to your table because it can always be a bit of a challenge. I find sometimes when you have one big central centerpiece, getting some color down the table can be a challenge. So again, I'm just taking that excess soil and I'm just planting the edges here. And like I was mentioning earlier, you're going to get some of those stragglers with some of these Muscari because they've already started to grow. But really great with bulbs. Bulbs are so easy that way that you really can't mess them up too much. After they start to emerge out of that bulb, they're just going to keep doing their thing. Unless, of course, you overwater them. Then they're going to give you a bit of grief. But otherwise, once they start to grow, easy peasy. So when you're transplanting them like this, it's really hard to do too much damage. So you can see I've got all of the little bulbs kind of showing off there at the top. Apparently took my gloves off, and I'm still going to add a little bit of soil here. But just like so. And then I'm just going to quickly clean up my desk here because I want to show you guys just how to decorate this a little bit so it looks a little bit more polished for your table centerpieces. So I'm just going to, I grabbed some paper towel here, so it was really easy cleanup for me this morning. There we go. So I've just got my little planters, just like so. Rob grabbed me a coffee, so it was really nice. Thank you, honey.
You're
That's
welcome.
good. So you've got them all sort of situated. They're planted in here. They look great, but let's take it a step further. We're going to add a little bit of moss. So I'm using this reindeer moss this morning. And reindeer moss is usually, if you've got a cottage up north, you'll find it growing on some of the rocks, like up in the Halliburton region and that sort of thing. We're in Tiny, so I don't see too much of this moss up here, but I used to see a lot of it when we used to go up to my dad's. So really great. You just want to pull it apart. It's very spongy. This has been dyed a little bit of that sort of chartreuse green, which is really pretty. Otherwise, it's usually like a stone color in the natural form. But if you're lucky enough to travel up to cottage country or whatever, if you've got a little bit of that availability, you can harvest this yourself, which is great. And you can just use the stone color. But I'm just going to place a little bit of this around my bulbs, just on the outside of my planter. I want to tuck in anything that's kind of going a little wild here. And I just want to cover a little bit of that soil with some of this chartreuse moss. And I just grabbed a little bag of it here that I'm going to do just a little bit. And you can see the next thing I'm going to do is take a little bit of some branch material and give these some support because they're a little bit wild. You want to pick them up just a little bit, but you could use any moss, like a lot of popular moss. Another one is the sheet moss, which is like just the green, sort of almost looks like, that's pretty available. I even have some of that growing in my yard down in Schaumburg, so it's usually around. You can usually find a little bit of something like that. You could also just use like anything you would use, stones, a little bit of stones in here could be really pretty, a little bit of gravel. You could also use wood chips, would be another fun thing. If you have a larger container, you could use a little bit of wood chips just to kind of cover them just a little bit. You still want that bulb to sort of show off a little bit. I know I do, so I'm kind of just moving this in between. Just want to tidy it up ever so slightly there. But you can kind of see those little bulbs kind of poking through there. Just like so, which is looking really cute. Perfect. But yeah, one last thing we're going to do with these is just add some support. So I had some planters that I did for the winter, which are hopefully going to be unfrozen the next time I come up. They weren't this time, but hopefully next week or the weekend after they'll be nice and thawed. But I was able to remove some of the branches that I used. So I used a bit of birch branch just to kind of elevate my planters. So I'm just going to take a few of these smaller birch branches and add them into the sides of my planter here with my Muscari to give them a bit of support, because we want them to have a bit of something to sort of get them to behave a bit here. So again, just going to take a few little branches, push them into the sides of your planter, and then you can take your bulbs and kind of guide them around these branches a little bit. Whoops. Just want to add enough so that they behave a little bit. You can cut them down. You don't want them too high. If you were doing this, really depends on where you're putting this, but if you're doing this for a table centerpiece, Generally, they say try to keep it like below 18 inches or so. I always find you can break the rules with branches though, because they're nice and light and airy. So I think that's a great way to reuse your winter planters too. Some of you may have dogwood or other types of branches that you used in your planters. So this is a great way to just kind of reuse them and just use them for bulb support in a centerpiece like this. And, you know, if you have really, really long ones, really, really long little bulbs that have started to go crazy, you can just cut them. That's kind of a fun thing with these types of centerpieces as well, is you can often trim them down and use them in little bud vases or vases around the house to sort of get a little bit more mileage out of them. So if they're starting to really get a little wild on you, just trim down some of those longer blooms. And you can use them in just some mini little vases or something like that around the house, which is perfect. Any questions out there as we're going through? No?
No.
Everybody's good? I wonder if it's still raining. Looks pretty nice out, I think. It's very foggy up here because I guess we're getting such a nice warm front in with the cold snow. And believe it or not, yesterday we still saw people out on Georgian Bay with their ice fishing, like walking out on the ice. I was like, wow, those guys are brave. There's a lot of water on the ice, but I guess it's still really thick and frozen. So, and if you're used to that, people are used to that up here. I think they're pretty fearless in that department. Perfect. So as you can see, that's just kind of adding a little bit of support there, which is really helpful for these little Muscari, which is perfect. I'm just going to set that guy aside. And Muscari, again, is one of those bulbs that the squirrels and your little woodland friends do not like, because they've got a little bit of a toxic element to them. So oftentimes if you're struggling with things that the squirrels are not going to eat in your garden, this is one of them. So it's a really great one to invest in. I know I have troubles with that at home because we have a lot of squirrels and chipmunks and they love to eat my tulip bulbs. So over the years, I've just kind of learned to plant more daffodils and muscari and hyacinths because they don't love those. They won't eat them. So it's a really great little way to keep them at bay. Someone else suggested to me, I was teaching some classes at Newmarket, and there was a gardener there, and she suggested to me that she double plants her bulbs. So she plants her tulips lower and plants the daffodils on top, and that's how she keeps the squirrels from eating her bulbs. And I was like, well, that's pretty smart. So I'm actually going to try that this year, see if I have success with that, because I thought that was a really great suggestion. There we go. I'm going to just take a little bit of paper here, clean this up, just so you guys can get the full effect here. There we go. And I always like to, I've got a little bin here. So if you're doing something like this at home, having a little planting bin, or, I mean, if it was really nice out today, we probably would have even done this outside. But it's really handy because that way you don't feel like you're making a huge mess when you're going about your planting business here. Just like so. But yeah, those are our two little pots. So we've got them. So like I said, these can be great as they grow. Like you can just take your snips and trim off any of those longer bulbs and just use these little guys in a little bud vase or whatnot. I know I had that little broken one from earlier. These could be so cute in little shot glasses or little tiny bud vases just around throughout this as well. Just a couple of glass vases. So trim them down as they grow. And then when you're finished with these could just go in between, which would be so, so sweet. As you're finished with these are going to grow, they're going to die back. So they're going to kind of grow into that sort of brown foliage, and they're going to sort of dry up and become kind of crispy, and that's normal. That's what you want them to do. The bulbs will absorb all those nutrients left over from the greenery and kind of harden up a little bit. And at that point, you can pull them out of your planter, knock the dirt off, keep them in a paper bag, and then plant them in the fall. And that way they'll come back up next spring and they'll sort of show you some love in the gardens, which is really great. So they'll kind of be that thing that just keeps on going. But that's why I find bulb arrangements or anything in the spring is a great investment, because you're not only going to get some enjoyment of them inside, you can transfer them, like I said, outside to a planter, front door planter or window boxes. Those types of things as well are great. And then trim off the blooms, use them in little bud vases as you're enjoying them. They're so sweet. And then keep those bulbs and plant them in the garden. And then you've got these sort of year after year after year. So as we close off this morning, hopefully you guys got some fun ideas, some different ways to approach some indoor decor for the spring. Think about bulbs. It's a great investment. It's beautiful. It's fragrant. And it's the gift that keeps on giving. And we'll see you next time. Happy Sunday, everybody. Hope you enjoyed watching. Take care. Have a great day.